today's presentation, in honor of Men's Health Month, we are going to talk about stronger, longer men's health essentials after 50 to help you not only feel healthy and younger, but to maybe look healthy and younger as well. So we will get moving into the presentation. Just a disclaimer. As we begin, I'd just like to remind everyone that today's presentation is for educational purposes. Yes, I'm a licensed healthcare provider. I am a family nurse practitioner, but uh, my our presentation does not replace the advice of your specific doctor or your specific healthcare professional. If I mention something today that sounds familiar or raises concerns, I encourage you to have a follow-up conversation with your provider for personal guidance. Okay, so Alice Benjamin, family nurse practitioner. I've been in healthcare now for going on 27, 28 years, primarily in critical care, emergency medicine, and it's working in those environments that have really taught me a lot about how we respond to healthcare emergencies, how we respond to the trauma after the damage has been done. In this latter part of my career, I'm really focused on early identification, prevention, those type of things, so we can prevent the emergency. And so that's why my mantra is I like to talk to people before they become my patients. And in doing that, you may have seen me doing, I've been a long time. Maybe a legacy volunteer now, Antoine. I don't know. I think I'm just worthy of a pin now with
Yes.
AARP as well as American Heart Association. But then you may have also seen me, especially if you're in the Los Angeles area, on NBC talking about various health and wellness topics. Okay, so for today, we have today's topic is so worthy of so much more time. It's very, very important. But we have 1 hour, and so I wanted to establish some learning objectives. So for today, my goal would be that you all walk away with some fundamental understandings of these things. So to identify key health screenings, it's really important that we identify and you understand what these health screenings are for men age 50 and above. And it's not just because it's something to check off on the list, but because these health screenings are important milestones that can help identify and detect changes in conditions early on when things are it's the action is maybe a lot milder, something simple, maybe a lifestyle change. So we'd like to catch things early. Also to better understand the correlation between lifestyle impact and our wellness. And I know we talk about diet and exercise, like, oh, Nurse Alice, we talk about that all the time, but tell me the real stuff. Well, I'm here to tell you, and we'll get into some nitty gritty and some details here about how how our foods and our exercise and other things really play a role in our health. So you can see the correlation between, maybe if I do these interventions with the exercise or the diet changes, it may offset or delay or improve some of these other chronic conditions that I might be experiencing. And then we'll talk about some of those age-related changes. What happens as men age? What are some of those things that, okay, with father time, these are things that are just bound to happen. And then what are some of those things like, well, I really shouldn't attribute that to age. There's something else going on that deserves a closer look. So we are going to talk about those things. And also, pardon me for not saying today's focus, men, it's all about you. It's all about the fellas. So, ladies, if we have any ladies on the call today watching, you are just as equally welcome. Sharing is caring, and I'm hoping that for our ladies on the call, that they share this information with an important man in their life, whether it's your son, your husband, grandfather, whoever the case may be. But it really takes a village. So the spotlight, the stage is for the men, but women, there's lots for us to learn as well. Okay, so let's talk about why men's health matters. Let's look at the bigger picture here. So I think we can all agree that one of the main goals for many people is they want to not only maximize their years, but also remain healthy, active, independent, and enjoy their life. Would everyone agree with that? Either a thumbs up, shaking your head. Yep. Okay. I'm with you. Now that's our North Star. That's what we're aiming for. Now I'm going to get into a little bit of science and some details, and it's not to scare us, but just to look at the what's currently happening. So if we look at the Centers of Disease Control, they will say that the average life expectancy here in the United States for a man is 76.5 years. That's about 5 years shorter than a woman's lifespan. Now, that's just out there. Uh, doesn't make it that that's your destiny or for you, but it's something that's out there and something we want to look at because if you're, you know, coming up on that age or you're around that age or even beyond that age, it can be scary, right? It can be a very frightening statistic. And but we're going to get to some details about some things that go on with men's health, how to identify things and things that we can do because we do know that many of the leading causes and illnesses and death for men strongly are influenced by things that you can actually influence. Things like heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, and certain cancers. So these things are not always avoidable, but many times they can either be prevented, delayed, or managed with early identification and intervention. And the goal, again, is simply not just addressing the years in life, but the goal is preserving independence, mobility, and quality of life. So, what changes after 50? What are those normal aging things and what are some health concerns? Well, my knees will tell you it's the knees that change, but I know that there's a lot of other things that do change. And so, this is one of the most common questions I get because sometimes people are not aware of what is a normal age related finding versus something that warrants more concern. So again, some changes are expected. We naturally will lose some muscle mass. Our metabolism slows down. Recovery takes a little bit longer, and our energy levels may fluctuate. But not everything should be blamed on age. Things like significant fatigue, sudden weakness, unexplained weight loss, or major changes in memories, those are things that definitely deserve attention. Aging shouldn't be an excuse for ignoring symptoms. And so, as you can see here on the slide, as the gentleman's looking in the mirror, it's important that we look at, we do an evaluation of ourselves. Many of us will go to your provider, and which you should do, but it's important that you pay attention to your body and ask yourself, like, is something changing? How do I feel? And you got to take mental note of these because your provider only sees you when you make the appointment. But there may be times where you actually need to be seen a little more frequently, or there's something that came up. Instead of just brushing it off, maybe you do need to come in a little bit earlier. And again, we're going to talk about some many conditions here. So we're going to start with cardiovascular disease. So this is one of the most concerning healthcare threats. Heart disease remains one of the leading causes of injury or death, I should say, in men. And many people think that heart disease means heart attack. So, but actually, when we talk about cardiovascular disease, it's the entire cardiovascular system. So it's more than just a heart attack, which is a blockage of blood flow to the heart, but that includes conditions like a stroke, which is if you kind of think of a heart attack for your heart, think of it like a brain attack. Heart failure. That's when the heart. You may have heard someone say, "Oh, my heart's a little bit weaker." Well, those are things that fall under the kind of category of heart failure, where the heart has difficulty pumping and even peripheral artery disease. So this is narrowing of arteries in our limbs. So these are things that we don't necessarily think about when we say cardiovascular disease, heart disease, we kind of put them together, but I really want you to think of the entire body. And so when we look at things like that, now there is some encouraging things here because there are some things that we can manage, control, and screen for. So when we think of what are the primary risk factors for these things, well, hypertension, which is also known as high blood pressure. So you can check your blood pressure on one of those devices, have your provider check it, and we can see that. That's that and high cholesterol are some of the easier things I think to look at and track and trend because we actually see concrete numbers there. But knowing what your blood pressure is, and actually put in the chat box. Does everyone know what their blood pressure is? Yeah. Okay. How about your cholesterol levels? Does everyone know what their cholesterol levels are or what their last cholesterol levels were? Okay. Antoine, help me out with the chat box because I can't see the.
Yes. Yep. Some people are saying yes to both.
Okay.
Yes and yes. Yep,
Okay,
for my
good.
doctor's appointment. Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, now diabetes management. How about your hemoglobin A1C or your glucose level? How's that one? Do we know what that one is?
Yes.
Okay, very good. All right, so those are very important and critical numbers. Uh, those numbers can tell us a lot about your health. Now, we don't just treat numbers; we treat people. But having that information is going to be critical because with that information, it helps us as providers to know how um, I don't, should I say aggressive or what type of how many things we should be doing and how quickly, right? Because we want to bring these numbers into control because they can lead to, as I mentioned, cardiovascular disease. Now, some of the other things that we need to also know are primary risk factors for this are tobacco use. So cigarettes, cigars, even vaping. I'm going to throw that in there too. And then obesity. Now we can get on a scale and know our weight. People know their weights. I know that might sound like a silly question, but some people, it's like you haven't gotten a scale in a while. You're like, oh, where those 10 pounds come from when you get on the scale? Knowing your weight is important, and we'll even get into things like understanding what your BMI is, and more importantly, um, outside of BMI is your weight circumference. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and this is a spoiler alert, but I'm going to talk about weight circumference. If you don't know what your weight circumference is, like if you got a measuring tape, I want you to measure your waist, right? I'll get into what the numbers should be, but that's actually a very important number. And it tells us a lot about the visceral fat, the fat you carry around your waist. That's actually very important. So if your doctor's never measured that, that's something like say, hey, doc, don't you want to know what my waist measurement is so you can really determine what my risk factors are? And then also, family history plays a role in this. There are genetically like for example, cholesterol. There are genetically influenced cholesterol levels that we need to watch out for, and then physical activity. All of these things are risk factors for cardiovascular disease. So we need to know what these numbers are, know what our history is, and have a conversation with your doctor so you can manage these things. So I jumped a little bit into this, knowing your numbers. I already asked about the blood pressure. We talked about the cholesterol and triglycerides as part of that cholesterol panel. The A1C, hemoglobin A1C, the fasting glucose, BMI, and weight circumference. So I've already mentioned these are numbers that you want to know. Again, these numbers provide a very important snapshot of your overall health. Especially with detecting risk factors. And actually, they take this information also along with some other lab values, your age, and other things, and they put them in these. There's a risk score calculator where your provider can actually calculate your risk of a cardiovascular event, and that helps to either be reassure that you're doing all the right things, or there might be a warning sign that says, "Hey, we put all this data in the risk calculator. Your risk for a cardiovascular event is actually kind of high. We need to look at changing some things up here." So these things are very important. And I'll go ahead. Has anybody heard about waist circumference and what that size should be for men by chance? Anyone? Anyone?
We see no's. Yeah, just
Okay.
a couple no's.
So if you didn't know this one, here's something that I definitely want you to talk to your doctor about. If your circumference has never been measured, and if you don't have a tape measure, when you go to your next office, when you check in for your appointment, when they do the blood pressure and everything else, ask them to measure your waist circumference. But ideally, your waist circumference less than 37 inches is for optimal metabolic health. Okay, because I mentioned that waist circumference gives us an idea of how much visceral fat is there. So less than 37 is ideal. Um, if you're between that 37 and 40 inches, and this is also kind of your pant size if you think about it, guys. So when you're 37 to above 37 to 40, that's generally considered low. It's considered a lower health risk, but 40 and above, that's when you're increased risk for cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and other chronic conditions. And so the pant size matters. Okay. So talk to your doctor about that. Make sure that's included in all of your calculations when you're being screened, because that is a very important number. And if you just think about it, your waist, your waist should be less than half of your actual height. I know that sounds like, wow, yeah, my waist should be less than half my height, but in some people it's not. So something to consider there. All right. So we talked about some of those basic labs that on the previous slide, and those are done usually for your like your annual wellness screening and those type of things. Now we're going to look at some other important diagnostics for cardiovascular health. Now, these are things that are covered by Medicare. If they haven't been done, make sure you talk to your doctor about them. But these are actually beyond the traditional cholesterol panel because. And there's new guidelines. If you guys haven't heard, there's some brand new updated cholesterol guidelines. So these are all within the newer guidelines. When we look at the cholesterol panel and we stop there, it doesn't give us a full, complete picture of what's going on in the body. And so, what we have here are some other cholesterol tests, and there's a scan included that really completes the cardiovascular picture. So, there's something called lipoprotein A, or we call it LPA, little a. This is the genetically influenced particle. So, if you're having a hard time managing your cholesterol levels are elevated, um, and it's like you're doing all the things, and it's really just it's having a difficulty coming down. We want to know what your LPA is because sometimes we're fighting an uphill battle because it's genetically something in your genes, blame your parents, but there's something there that's going to make managing cholesterol a little difficult. So perhaps we need to be even a little more aggressive with things. There's also this apolipoprotein B or ApoB. This actually is starting to be viewed at more of an indicator than your LDL. It represents when we say atherogenic particles, these are the particles that are really sticky that can stick to to the blood vessel walls and embed and cause plaque. So apolipoprotein B is something that we want to monitor. You might have your LDL might be fine, happy, it's in the green, but if your apolipoprotein B is elevated, you're still at risk for developing plaque. There's also the high sensitivity C-reactive protein. This is an inflammation marker that's very specific to the cardiovascular system. And so this is something that we look at because you might have an excellent, your hemoglobin A1C looks good, your cholesterol panel looks good, but your high sensitivity, your C-reactive protein is off the charts. Well, that indicates to us that there's still some inflammation going on there. So it's still an important part of cardiovascular health. Now, we'll have to manage that differently, right? So we look at things that influence that. So those are things like unmanaged stress, not getting enough sleep, smoking, excessive alcohol. So it's really an indicator of what's causing inflammation in my cardiovascular system. So that's also very important. And it can contribute. So if you have plaque there, that's what will cause it to be unstable, to break off and to travel. And then also a coronary artery calcium scan. Some call it a coronary artery CT scan, but it's a non-invasive way of looking at the coronary arteries. And so used to be, in order for us to know what's going on in your coronary arteries, we used to have to do a cardiac catheterization where we had to invasively insert a wire and kind of thread it up to your coronary arteries. That's an invasive procedure. And so, and there are risks that come with that. But now with technology, there's a scan that we can do, and we can look at your coronary arteries and look for hardened, calcified plaque. Now, there is also things called soft plaque, which we can't see, but we can see if there's calcified hard plaque in your coronary arteries. And if there is, again, it's kind of another engine light, if you will, to say, oh, all these other numbers look good, but we can't lose sight on the mission. We still got to stay diligent and keep things very tight. So you may actually even be asked to have even a lower cholesterol level because you have plaque buildup, but you won't know that unless you do the scan. So for everyone that's on this call, when you have a chance, go back to your MyChart or whatever labs you have. Ask your provider, have you had these labs done? These should be included in addition to your hemoglobin A1C, in addition to your lipid panel to get a full picture of your cardiovascular, right? So those are things that are real important. Now we're going to segue a little bit into some lifestyles that protect the heart. Now, some people say, "Oh, Alice, you can skip this. We've heard this before. Exercise. I exercise a little bit. I eat healthy most of the time." But it's really, really important for people to understand that these are the things. If I could prescribe anything at first, before I prescribe medication, I want to prescribe diet and exercise. And I want you to all to look at this as food as medicine and movement is medicine. These are things that, and if you think about it, how does plaque, those all those things happen? How do the heart disease and all that? That's usually an accumulation of things over time. It's usually from lifestyle habits that we've not really, done very well or as best as we could. And so this is really plays a very important role. So regular activity and strength training. So when we talk about activity, people say, "Oh, well, I go walking. I do cardio." Everyone's familiar with cardio, right? Kind of walking, jogging, those type of things where we're keeping our heart rate elevated for a period of time. It's pretty low resistance, and that's important. Got to do that. We want to do that. Um, but we also, it's very, very important that we also do strength training, especially over 50. As we age, we lose bone density, we lose muscle mass, and building muscle is going to be helpful for us because when we lift heavy things, it stimulates the bones to keep increase the density, increase the bone matrix to keep it strong, and it helps us to retain muscle mass. And when we do these type of activities, it also keeps our metabolism rate up. So we're not putting on the pounds as easily, and it helps with our cardiovascular endurance. It's good exercise for the heart. So weight management, we talked about that already. Um, when we do the first part, the activity and the strength training, that plays a big role with weight management, keeping our weight healthy. When we have excess pounds on, that can actually increase a lot of cardiovascular strain. When we put the weight on, it actually contributes to other metabolic conditions like um, insulin resistance, fatty liver disease, and a bunch of other things. So managing our weight is not just for aesthetics. It's not just to fit into those pants, but it is to also benefit our cardiovascular system. Tobacco avoidance, we definitely want to avoid that. Nicotine, that's in the cigars and the cigarettes, and actually in vaping. And vaping, I'll just say this: vaping is not regulated, so we never know how much nicotine is in a product. There might be a label slapped on there, but there's nobody regulating how much nicotine is in that. And that's actually for a whole nother presentation. But that nicotine actually causes vasoconstriction, and it causes stress hormones to be released, which is harmful for our cardiovascular system and contributes to inflammation as well. Um, Sleep and stress. Now, I know who doesn't have a stressful day here and there? Well, if we have a stressful day here and there, no problem. But if we're chronically having stressful days every day, that stress hormone that's released can negatively influence our cardiovascular system. It causes that inflammation. And sleep. That's an important one too. So in the chat box, just curious, how many hours of sleep is everyone getting on here? Just curious. Are we sleeping 4 hours? Are we sleeping 8 hours? What are we sleeping?
Uh, Approximately seven. What people are saying, 7 to 8.
Wonderful. Everyone passes. Everyone's A on the test. So we want to have about at least 7 to 9 hours of sleep. That's actually very important. Sleep is a very important time. You might think like, "Oh, I'm resting. It's an opportunity to recover." Yes, but there are actually very important processes that are happening through the night that help with our immune system, that help with muscle building. It's like an opportunity to kind of for the immune system kind of sweep away toxins. Actually, our weight can be better managed when we get sleep. During our sleep time, that's when ghrelin and leptin are released, and so when we don't get enough sleep, those are dysregulated, which can cause us to make it easier for us to put on the pounds. So sleep is also important for stress hormone regulation, and then healthy eating. We got to eat nutrient dense whole foods, and I'm just going to go ahead and put my little commercial out there. So when we're, whole foods, healthy foods, less boxed, processed, fast foods. when we're talking about heart healthy foods, and I know it's not manageable all the time, so we got to do the best with what we can. But if I may say, and this is what I always share with people that I speak with, more chicken and fish versus red meats, more bacon grilled versus fried, making sure you're getting adequate amounts of proteins, and then also that you're including enough fiber in your diet as well. Spoiler alert, but fiber is an unsung hero. And when we have enough, when most about less than a third of Americans get enough fiber in their diet. You should have at least 30 grams of fiber a day for men over the age of 50. And the reason being is fiber actually helps to control your cholesterol and your blood sugar as well. And it's good for our gut health, healthy microbiome and all that stuff, but really for the cholesterol and the blood sugar management too. So there's lots of things here. Lifestyle is so important. It improves our metabolic health, and it actually plays a very, very important role in our endocrine system. And we're going to segue into things like testosterone and things like that. But it also helps with our vitality, so our physical performance. So if we want our optimal physical health, we got to make sure that we're doing the lifestyles there. Okay, so now we're going to get into understanding testosterone here. So this is probably one of the most talked about hormones in men's health. Many advertisements will suggest that low energy, weight gain, and reduced stamina automatically mean low testosterone. And the reality is it's a lot more nuanced than that. And just, especially if there's some ladies on here, just as a reminder, testosterone is the primary male sex hormone, and it's produced primarily by the testes, but it's actually regulated by the hypothalamus and the pituitary in our brain. So this hormone plays a very important role in so many different things. And as you can see from the screen there, it helps with musculoskeletal health. I don't know if you all knew that, but it helps with maintaining muscle mass and bone density. It helps with the our energy production. It plays a role in producing red blood cells. It helps with regulating our mood and our sexual function. And here's the thing about testosterone. As we age, there will be some natural decline as part of the aging process. But there are some lifestyle habits that, the things that we don't do, that can actually contribute to a steeper decline in that. But clinically, if someone says, "Well, Alice, what's a normal testosterone range?" Right? And lab will differ, so I'm not going to throw out any numbers, but there's usually a range of for a testosterone. And here's even the reason why this is so nuanced is there's total testosterone, there's free testosterone, there's bioavailable testosterone. So there's different things that we look at when we're looking at testosterone. It really and I don't know if this has been the case for anyone, but we really should be looking at more than just one number, right? Because there's a big clinical picture that we need to look at. So there's some variabilities that will happen when it comes to measuring testosterone and what's a normal value. But more importantly, also, what are the manifestations of your specific value? So you might be lower on the lower end of normal, but you're not fatigued, your red blood cells are fine, and everything's great. Where you actually might be in the lower end of normal, but you're having all of these symptoms. So there are some things that we need to look at when it comes to understanding testosterone. So we'll get into some of the signs. So, there's some physical changes that can happen with testosterone. There's physical changes. So you'll see there might be some muscle wasting, a decrease in your physical strength. You notice you're not as strong as you were. And so this is kind of where what's a normal aging symptom versus something that might warrant more attention. Some people might say, "Oh, I'm getting older. That's why." Well, okay, we do know that as we age, we lose some muscle mass, we lose some bone density, but maybe I don't need to lose it this quickly. Is there anything else that could be contributing or causing this? So that's kind of the purpose of why we're talking about testosterone. Many people know it for sexual health, which is yes, it does play an important role in libido and erectile dysfunction. It does, and I think that's one of the symptoms that most people are most aware of. And so it's important. It is important for that. But it also does affect your mood. You just might be a little more fatigued. You just don't got the energy, more frequent mood swings. You're just moody and you're just like, what's going on with me? Right. And you can't pinpoint what actually it is. And then also, testosterone can actually contribute to brain fog. So testosterone actually plays a very important role. It's actually um, something that there's actually a lot of neuroreceptors and things that, testosterone actually plays a very important role with our neurotransmitters. And so it can lead to difficulty concentrating, um, maybe feeling a little bit more forgetful. Now, now that's not to say that if you're someone on here who's like, I have some brain fog, it must be my testosterone. Hold on, hold on, hold on. It may be, but there are other things. But this is why it's important that you talk to your healthcare provider and you get your testosterone looked at. Oh, did I? Oh, do I have? Hold on. I think I have a slide. Let's see. Okay, maybe it's on the next slide. Okay, so let's talk about what influences your testosterone. Because let's say you do have a low testosterone, does that automatically means it needs to be replaced?
Hey, Nurse
Well,
Alice, I'm
yes,
sorry, I wanted to jump in. There is a question.
sure.
It says, is Kegel, Kegel,
Kegels.
exercise recommended for improving sexual health?
Um,
Kegel.
Kegels, yes. I'm not as familiar with in men, but for women, yes. Kegels. It's actually it's a pelvic floor exercise.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
yeah. So
That
yeah.
was the only one. Okay, go
Okay.
ahead.
So, but when we look at testosterone, let's say you check your testosterone levels and your provider says, oh, a little bit on the lower side. Automatically people want to jump into, well, should I replace it? Can I get a testosterone supplement? Those type of things. Well, before that happens, we got to look at a bunch of other things and we got to look at your lifestyles and have, so like those things that I mentioned earlier, it's like, oh, I know about sleep. I know about physical activity and all those things. Those things actually influence your testosterone. They actually can decrease your levels of testosterone. So getting a optimal amount of sleep, that helps. The optimal amount of hormone secretion occurs when you get consistent, high quality sleep cycles. So, sleep is very important for your testosterone. Same with physical activity, weight management as well. These things can all contribute to an imbalance in your testosterone. Alcohol, especially in excessive amounts, can play a crucial role and negatively impact your endocrine function, which is the system that produces the testosterone, and then stress. So all of these things that we just talked about, that we just talked about with cardiovascular system, also influence your testosterone. So those are things that you want to look at. So before we, if you're someone, you're like, you know what, I'm having some of these symptoms, my testosterone is a little bit lower, maybe I need some supplementation for this. First, there's some things we got to do first. And some of those things are, one, this definitely does require the supervision of your healthcare provider. Generally, you start with your family doctor, family nurse practitioner, and then the to get something to get some initial testing done, because we'll look at testosterone, we'll look at some other hormones, we'll evaluate your lifestyles. Are you getting enough sleep and all those things on the previous slide? But the person who's most suited to manage testosterone replacement would be someone like an endocrinologist, because they are the hormones expert. But when we're looking at this, we got to look at improving your quality of life. All right. We want you to feel better, right? But we also want you to do the healthy lifestyle habits to make sure that it's sustainable and not just dependent on a medication. Because even if we gave you testosterone replacement, if you don't fix the underlying causes, we'll be fighting an uphill battle here. And then clinical necessity. Not everyone who has a low testosterone needs replacement, especially if if you're not having any of the symptoms that we mentioned previously. And everyone's testosterone replacement plan will be different based on all of those things that I mentioned, your lifestyle habits, not only the full testosterone panel, but all of the other hormones. So we're going to check you for other things. We're going to check, and for the men, so you understand. So uh, total testosterone, free testosterone, bioavailable testosterone. Then we're still going to check you for your LH, FSH. We're going to check your progesterone. We're going to check all the hormones. And so everyone's plan will be a little bit different based on all of their results. And this does require active surveillance or supervision from your doctor. And especially, again, not everyone needs testosterone replacement, but that is something that if you do, start it with your primary, and then the ideal person to follow it would be an endocrinologist.
And before you jump off of testosterone, Nurse Alice, another
Yep.
question is, what's the difference between total and free testosterone?
Okay, so total testosterone is kind of all of the testosterone that you have. You have some testosterone that is free floating around. It's not bound to any of the proteins or albumin. Um, So testosterone often binds to, it's called a sex hormone globulin, or sometimes it's bound to albumin. And then there's free testosterone that's kind of just floating around and available for immediate use. So there are differences in them. So total, then there's testosterone that's bound to a protein and testosterone that's free and available for immediate use. So even that, and that's how nuanced this is. You might have your total testosterone actually might be normal and fine, but your free testosterone might be very low. And then it's like, well, if you look at just one number, you won't get the full picture because you're like, gosh, my total testosterone looks good, but I'm tired. I'm having all these symptoms. But your free testosterone is low. So we got to figure out what's going on with that. And then also figuring out where's the problem stemming from. Is it that my brain, the pituitary and hypothalamus, is not sending enough signal to the testes, or maybe the testes are getting the signal, but the testes aren't producing enough. So that's why, I mean, everyone's treatment for testosterone will be different based on what the actual cause is. And the only way we're going to know that is we got to do that full set of hormone panels. And some of the guys might be like, wait a minute, these are lady hormones. And not necessarily lady hormones, but they're hormones that are more talked about. For example, we talk about testosterone mostly in men, we talk about estrogen in women, but we have both. Both of us have both. But it's just a matter of what the balance is. Okay. Now, we're talking about, so we talked about testosterone. We're going to segue now here to sexual health. Now, understanding this after 50, there are some things that'll happen. There's some natural changes that will happen in our libido and things like that. But um, it's very important to understand that when we have changes in our sexual health, whether it's low libido or maybe we're experiencing some erectile dysfunction, that these actually could be, they should not just be limited to just sexual health. They actually could be early indicators that there's something else going on. So, for example, erectile dysfunction, if that you may notice that you're experiencing that, that actually might be the early warning sign that there is a larger thing at play here, and it's actually cardiovascular condition, because erectile dysfunction is actually a vascular health issue and not just a sexual health issue. So there are things that we got to look at. um, Sometimes we're on certain medications that might decrease our libido, and so that might be the culprit there. And so, it's important that you talk to your healthcare provider, and don't be ashamed, don't be shy about it. That should be Sexual health is a very important part of your overall health, and again, could be an early indicator that there might be something else brewing. So don't feel hesitant or shy to talk about that. If something's changed, if you're experiencing any of these symptoms, talk to your healthcare provider about those. So again, for the erectile dysfunction, and I think this is another reason why I draw this one out, is actually there's an extreme vascular link to it. So it's sometimes an early indicator for some of these other things like cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, diabetes. There could be inflammation going on, peripheral vascular disease. So if you're experiencing this, talk to your healthcare provider. And I know sometimes when this happens, some people are just more rushed to, well, how can I just fix it? I want to have a healthy sexual life, and that's fine. Those are things that, you should desire. There's nothing wrong with that. But also, let's not short side the conversation and not explore the bigger picture, and make sure that there's nothing else cardiovascular wise that's going on. So remember in that earlier slide, I said, make sure you do all these other labs to make sure you're getting a full picture of your cardiovascular system. Having those complete labs can actually, if you're experiencing this, tell us more about your cardiovascular system. Okay, so these are some signs of when you should seek help for medical attention. Um, if you are having persistent erectile dysfunction, significant fatigue, just loss of libido, maybe you're having some new urinary symptoms, difficult starting or stopping a stream, urgency, not feeling like your bladder is not emptied, any mood changes, or any issues with memory or concentration. These are things, they may they many people again tie these to men's sexual health, but overall they can be early indicators that there's something else larger at play. And so, kind of segueing to that, because I started to talk about urinary symptoms, something else that becomes more common as men age is understanding the prostate. So there are different conditions that can affect the prostate. Um, the prostate is a gland that's located just right below the bladder. So here's your bladder, and so the prostate's here. So you can imagine, and here's another picture of it. When this prostate gets enlarged, it applies pressure to the urethra. And this is where your urine exits. And so when this gets enlarged, it can actually narrow the space in which the urine exits. So that's why urinary symptoms can often be an issue. Difficulty starting or stopping a stream, painful urination. Sometimes there's blood in the urine, or frequently having to get up and go and pee, especially during the nighttime. So this is why an enlarged prostate can become problematic. Now, as men age, your prostate will continue to grow over time. It will, right? And not all enlarged prostates become a problem. It depends on how it grows, right? You can imagine, I guess, if it's growing outward, that won't be a problem. If it grows inward towards the urethra, yeah, that can be the problem, right? So there's sometimes a prostate will enlarge and it's benign. It's just gotten enlarged. It's not cancerous. So that's what we call benign prostate hyperplasia. Sometimes there can be infections that can happen. Prostatitis is one of those infections that can happen to the prostate. And then, one that's alarming and more concern is the prostate cancer. We can get concerned that with prostate cancer, and I'll say this, you can have an enlarged prostate, doesn't necessarily mean prostate cancer. When you have prostate cancer, you generally have an enlarged prostate, right? So it can get a little scary and a little bit tricky. So this is important to manage and monitor. And there are ways to monitor this on your annual exam with like a prostate specific antigen, a simple blood test that your provider can do. Um, there is, some providers still do the digital rectal exam. It's fallen less out of favor and more doing the blood test because you can miss some things with the digital exam. But nevertheless, having some type of prostate screening is important. So these are some of the symptoms that I talked about that could be evidence of an enlarged prostate. Um, Frequent urination, nighttime, weak stream, difficulty starting, or incomplete emptying. So these are some symptoms. If you have any of these symptoms, doesn't necessarily mean that you have an enlarged prostate. And again, you can have an enlarged prostate and it's benign, not an issue. But we do want you to feel comfortable. So if you are having any of these urinary symptoms, please see your doctor, talk to them about it. They may refer you to a urologist who can do further testing, and there is treatment and management for it. Now, this prostate cancer screening. So I think out of all the prostate conditions, this one's probably the most concerning. And so, there are guidelines have changed with prostate cancer screening for men. This is actually a joint decision between you and your doctor. And so there is a simple blood test that can be done that can provide a lot of information. Now, when it comes to when the test is done, your provider may recommend it. I actually recommend men if they haven't had it by the age of 50 that they have one. But generally, if you have it runs in your family, you've had any other urinary concerns, we're gonna test a PSA, and the PSA can actually tell us more about your prostate overall. So this is something that you should consider if you have not had one, and knowing what your prostate specific antigen levels are. Now, switching to, we've talked a lot about testosterone, sexual health, the prostate, and things like that. Now I'm going to get into some other important health screenings for men. And one of them is the colorectal cancer screening. This can absolutely save lives. I'm just going to put in the chat box if anyone wants to share if they've had their colorectal cancer screening and want to share to encourage some of those on the webinar. Please do so. Some people get a little frightened by this because they think of, oh, this means I have to get a colonoscopy. And yes, colonoscopy is the golden standard. But let's first talk about why this is important. Colorectal cancer screening can actually save lives. Literally, screening for this, ideally with a colonoscopy, we can not we the GI specialist will go in with a camera, and this is something you're sedated for. You have to drink some prep, make sure your bowels are empty. They sedate you, and then they take their camera and they insert it, and they look through your intestines there, but they can look at the mucosal wall. They can see if you have ulceration. They can see if there's any other polyps, and if there are polyps, they'll want to remove them because polyps, over time, if allowed to stay there long enough, many of them are considered precancerous and can develop into cancer. So they remove those, and so it's one of the best ways because they can actually go in, visualize it. If there's anything concerning, they can actually do an intervention. Now, there are other ways to screen for this. Which I'd rather you get screened somehow than not at all. But There are other screenings, but before I get to that, I want to say the recommendation for colorectal cancer screening begins at age 45. Sooner, obviously, if you've had any family history or you've had polyps in the past. But by age 45, you should strongly consider getting colorectal cancer screening, ideally from a colonoscopy. But and there are some people who are not candidates for this because maybe they have bleeding problems or other things, and we don't want to take the risk of any potential bleeding. Not that you should, but have bleeding. But sometimes things. It's healthcare, so every once in a while there's something that may happen. But there is a stool test called the Cologuard. This is a stool test that collects DNA fragments, cancerous DNA, precancerous DNA fragments, and can check for blood in your stool. It's usually done about every 3 years. And actually, the American Cancer Society just released just maybe a month ago that there's a new FDA approved blood test that can screen for colorectal cancer. Now, it's not it, if that test does test positive, it it may mean that it's been there a little bit longer, right? If it's something that's new, the blood test may not pick it up. But I say that to say there are options. So getting colorectal cancer screened is it's important that you get it done. Now, which of these methods you choose, golden standards colonoscopy. But if you're not a candidate or if you're leery, I'd rather you do at least one of the other ones than not at all. Okay. And here are some other recommended screenings for men. Obviously, blood pressure, cholesterol, A1C, and those lipid panels we talked about. Just talked about colorectal cancer screening. We talked about prostate cancer screening. One thing, and I didn't have a slide for this one, but for those who have a history of smoking, especially if you smoked more than one pack a day for 20 years and you're over the age of 50, if any of that applies to you and you've smoked, and even if you've stopped smoking in the last 15 years, ask your doctor, your provider, do I need to ask them if you're a candidate for a low dose CT lung scan, and what that for people who have that type of significant smoking history, they can actually screen you for lung cancer. But you have to meet certain criterias in order to. Well, the guidelines recommend that you meet certain criteria for your provider to order it. Does that if now, and I'll just put this out there because it's awful sometimes how healthcare insurance controls our health monitoring. But if let's say you didn't quite meet the criteria, but you still did have a concern, your provider may still be able to order this with you, but just no insurance may not cover it. But there is a lung cancer screening that can be done. And then obviously, as we're looking at men's health, it's important that, I know there's been a lot of changes with vaccine schedules and things like that, but it's very important that you talk to your healthcare provider about what are the vaccines. For me, I just turned 50. What are some of the vaccines that I should be getting? Well, one I know is a pneumococcal vaccine. There's a shingles vaccine, right? There are some things that you want to talk to your healthcare provider about because just as much as there are milestone screenings, there's also recommendations for routine vaccines that should be done. And if you're someone with certain medical history, perhaps asthma, heart conditions, things that put you at higher risk, perhaps a flu shot every year. But, talk to your healthcare provider about what those vaccines are for you. Also, let's not forget that we should have a vision and hearing exam. And so, they do the vision exam where you're looking at the Snellen chart, which are identifying the letters and the numbers, but a more in-depth um, eye vision test should be done at least initially. At least when you and I'm using 50 as a milestone, but you can use, if you haven't had it done, just pick up where you can. But getting a more detailed eye exam. Have you had your eyes dilated? Has someone really taken a look into your eyes? So seeing that ophthalmologist and getting kind of an initial comprehensive exam for your eyes to see where you're at, right? You might be early stages of a glaucoma. We don't know that. But if you skip out, then you won't, by the time you complain about symptoms, that glaucoma is something that's maybe further along. Maybe there could have been some treatments that they could have done or medication they could have given you beforehand. And also hearing, right? So your provider can do some minor things in the office. They'll stand behind you and they kind of make some noise behind with your ear. And that's one version of it. But ask for an auditory exam where they put the headphones on you. Your eyes are closed and you have to hit a button every time you hear, hear a sound, right? We want to know what your vision, your hearing is because, and I will say this, even subtle changes in your vision and hearing can mean a lot for your brain health. As we age, they say everything atrophies, right? It gets a little bit smaller, muscles and everything, brain included. But with optimal healthy lifestyles we talked about and proper visual and auditory stimulation, our brain can the amount that it atrophies can decrease. Your brain needs an adequate amount of visual and auditory stimulation to maintain in its size. It needs to be stimulated. So those are important. And then also your bone health and density assessments. Now, I know a lot of people think of osteoporosis is more so in women because of their hormones and the estrogen and all of those things, but men are also at risk for osteoporosis as well. So this is something you got should talk to your healthcare provider, especially if you're someone who's fallen in the past, you've broken a couple bones, and it's like, well, why are you breaking bones so easily? We want to look at what your bone health and density are like. So we can do a density scan. Um, so that's something you can talk to your healthcare provider about. And while it didn't make the last slide, I also want to emphasize that our mental health is extremely important as we age. Depression, anxiety, social isolation, those things like chronic stress, they all play a role in our mental health. And your mental health actually is an important driver in order to optimize your physical health. So it's really difficult to have one without the other because they play such an important role. And if we're stressed or experiencing depression or anxiety, it's still going to cause a release of that cortisol level, which is going to cause inflammation in your cardiovascular system. So you can see how the two are very interrelated. So if you're having and not everyone receives an official diagnosis of anxiety or depression unless they've talked to their healthcare provider. But you know how you're feeling. So if you're persistently worried, chronically sad, you're withdrawing from friends, you're socially isolated, those could be cues that you're experiencing depression, even though no one's diagnosed you with it. So talk to your healthcare provider. Um, and I'll say this, I'm encouraging you to do that. But before, even if you're not quite there yet, let's look at your social connections. It's very important to have someone to talk to every day, meaningful relationships, purpose in life. Those things are very important. And then I'll also say physical activity can play a very important role in your mental health as well. And this is going to sound silly, but it's almost like you can either be sad or exercise, but you can't do both because when you're exercising, you can't work. You're not preoccupied about being sad because you're so focused on the activity, and that physical activity is the opportunity to release some endorphins, some positive hormones to hopefully combat some of those sad feelings that you're experiencing. Now, that's not to minimize anyone's sadness or grief, so I'm not meaning to do that, but I'm just saying that sometimes not so, many times physical activity can help to alleviate or lessen the amount or severity of the physical impacts of the mental health or sadness that you're experiencing. So, mental health is still a very important part of your health as well. And especially, and I don't mean to generalize, but men sometimes it seems like have more challenges with talking about how they're feeling. There was a season where men, you don't cry, you just buck up, suck it up type of thing. And, talk about your feelings. It's okay to not be okay. It is. So, as we walk away from today's presentation, I want you to understand as the core principles of longevity, these are some of the core pillars movement. It's important for maintaining muscle mass, strength, for balance, those type of things. Fueling your body, how you fuel your body with lean meats, lean proteins, fruits and vegetables, that fiber. That's the kind of the gasoline you put in your tank. So you want high quality gasoline to fuel your body. Sleep. This recovery is going to be extremely important. And not only is it just to make you feel better, but as we talked about, it helps your immune system, testosterone levels, the inflammation in your cardiovascular system. It plays such an important role. And the connection. Mental health is extremely important. So let's cultivate relationships. Even here, us connecting today is a form of connection and cultivating relationships with one another, even if it's virtually. So, consistently applying these pillars can help ensure or improve your opportunity for a well-being and improved quality of life. And this is at any age. So when you go to your healthcare provider, because I'm hoping I drop some gems here for you to go back and encourage conversation. Talk about these things. Let's ask about these preventative screenings. Have I done all the things, doc? Inquire about your cardiovascular health. Nurse Alice mentioned there's this other panel that can give a fuller picture. Have I done those things? Where am I at on them? Um, Maybe an advanced diagnostics. Maybe with your smoking history, you're someone who should get a CT of the lungs to assess for lung cancer. Metabolic markers, those are your hemoglobin A1Cs, your lab works. Talk to your doctor. Let them know how you're feeling and your symptoms. We know how we feel, but we don't always articulate that. So make sure you talk to your doctor about, what your symptoms are so we can help distinguish. Is this actually a normal part of aging? Or is this something that's rooted in some of my imbalanced hormones, my cholesterol levels, or whatever the case may be? And if anything, even assessing this is an actionable step, right? So even just doing a sweep and assessment of everything is the first step. And then if there's any opportunities there, I encourage you to please take the opportunity to make a change because nothing changes if nothing changes. So as a takeaway, you really have the opportunity to influence your well-being and your health. Let's reframe aging. Aging doesn't mean you're getting old, that things have to slow down or you can't do the things that you normally used to do that you want to do. You still can age gracefully, enjoying a quality of life, independence, mobility, and all of those things. And so there's some things that we'll just have to monitor, right? Your labs, your metrics, get those screenings and make sure that you're doing, the lifestyle and the foods and the things that can help with your cardiovascular health, your other overall holistic wellness, and just realize that your lifestyle is an investment. Okay. The choices you make today will impact you tomorrow. So let's invest wisely in our body and the things that we do physically, mentally, emotionally. Our ultimate goal is to stay strong, independent, and healthy. So, your health today helps shape your health for tomorrow. It's been my pleasure chatting with you. Any questions from the group?
There's Alice. There was just one question, and hold
Sure.
on, I'm going to let me go ahead and stop the recording.